This video is going to take a look at Daniel chapter 3 and explain a couple of rules of context and how to look into this chapter to pull a few details out that you probably never saw before. First rule of context is to look at the introduction and let the introduction explain the main theme of this chapter. King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then he sent messages to his office, high officers, officials, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the provincial officials that came to the dedication of the statue he had set up. So all these officials came and stood before the king, the statue King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now what we want to do is look at these repeated words. These words in green. First thing that pops out is these words in green. We see the word set up repeated. We see the word set up repeated down here again as we go into the story. And we see a movement. The king set up the statue and he sent messages to see the statue he set up. And then the officials came and the officials stood. So now we see a position. We see a number, and as we review, when you see a number of related words, all of these words are related by title. Officials again, king is repeated. We know that this main theme is the messages sent to all these people. And when we finish with this introduction, then a herald shouted out, "People of all races, nations, languages, listen to the king's command." Here we see 3 words repeated that have to do with related to communication. And this word command is related back to communication, but it carries a much heavier bearing, because this shows, basically reveals what the king is trying to accomplish as we go through this story. Then we see 3 words, 4 words, 5 words, 6 words, plain, proverbs. These are all related to ground, earth, and basically this begins to set up another context that we have to take a look at. And basically we can see that King Nebuchadnezzar's statue is related to this world. We want to look at the key words and let the key words explain what the spiritual lesson is behind this entire chapter, this entire story. Now we see a sequence of events. Then he sent messengers. Then a herald shouted out. You see how this is almost repeated? When you hear the sound. So basically we're there's a sequence of events all related to hearing and a messages. So we have to keep that in mind as we look at the rest of the chapter. Then we see the word immediately. Now we're drawn back to command and immediately. So the king wants everybody to immediately bow down, or in this case to obey, or immediately be thrown into the blazing furnace. So here's a quick decision. You got to make a quick decision. Now another set of keywords that we start seeing is bow, bow, bow down, serve, serves. These are repeated throughout this one. And we already went over, Nebuchadnezzar's teaching, his commands, his statue is set up on the ground, is set up in the world, so we got to keep that in mind. Now, we see another 3 words relating to communication. Issued, hear, and sound. You issued a decree requiring all the people to bow down and worship the gold statue when they heard the sound of the horn, and other musical instruments. So basically this, once again, centers on the main theme in this story. The king is issuing a decree requiring all the people. Okay, we see the word obey, decree, obey, ordered. Are you getting the spiritual lesson behind this? See, we got to look at contrast. In the last two chapters, we looked at the contrast. We noticed the contrast was between what they wanted to teach in Babylon and the wisdom that Daniel got directly from God. It's one of the main themes that runs through the entire book of Daniel. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, Your Majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. See, they bring it right back. Now we see the contrast. If we were thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, Your Majesty. This is it. We begin to see the contrast being revealed here. The contrast is between the God that Daniel's friends serve and Your Majesty, which is, refers to King Nebuchadnezzar, who represents Babylon. And there's the contrast is in who you're going to serve. And this is another key word dealing with time here, is never. But suddenly, and here's another word that has to do with timing, Nebuchadnezzar jumped up. In amazement, he explained to his advisors, didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace? Now, look at this. We can instantly, once we highlight these words, we can see all of this stuff has to do with flames, furnace, flaming furnace, all of this stuff we can see. And this sets up the spiritual lesson. Once the author starts repeating these words to draw attention to them, we should instantly know that there's some kind of spiritual lesson. This furnace represents something. And we're not going to guess at it because we're going to kind of let, in this case, the contrast will reveal what that furnace represents. Look, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, I see 4 men unbound, walking around in the fire, unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god. Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. Now, what you want to do is once you start seeing this sequence of movement words, Nebuchadnezzar jumped up. And those people are walking around in the fire, unharmed. See, there's movement here. There's a contrast in this movement, actually. Nebuchadnezzar's jumped out. He's outside the furnace. They're inside the furnace. Now you see Nebuchadnezzar jumped out. He had to come as close as he could to the door. He had to move to actually, look at this word in between, see. Look and see. See how that's repeated? Now, to draw attention to it, here's the key sentence right here. Came, come, stepped out. See how that establishes the main theme and draws us, this is to the main focus on a conclusion. Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close. He had to come to the door, the flaming furnace, and he shouted to these people. Now he recognizes the Most High God. Come out. Come here. Now, we have to look at this. We're going to know how come this is being repeated. And then they stepped out of the fire. But where did they step? They stepped out in front of Nebuchadnezzar. Then the high officials, governors, and all these people that Nebuchadnezzar is trying to influence crowded around them. See another movement? And saw. Now they had to go in front of the furnace, and they had to get close to the situation to see what was happening. And that's important for us to understand on a spiritual level. You notice how the word look and the word saw is kind of like bookends. Here's the story right in between here. So this is the little things we want to look at, is these little bookends. And inside these little bookends, concentrate on the words that are repeated. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel." Now here's another word that I missed, and this is a good reason. You know, you just keep on missing these words, and you go back and forth, and you keep on. Here's another one. See, this one, here's a title, but now this title is in contrast to these. God sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command. See, they didn't listen to the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve. We're seeing all those words would serve or worship any god except their own God. See how this summation really brings to light a whole bunch of, you see these different colors. It's bringing all of these key words into summation and explanation of what the lesson is. Therefore, then, and therefore, then. See, there's a sequence in learning. Therefore, I make this decree. If any people whatsoever their race. You see, here is language, speak, word. Now we see these three words have to do with communication. Key thought right here. Against the God will be torn from women or houses. Who's making this decree? Has Nebuchadnezzar learned his lesson? The guy started out making a decree. No, he just sort of changes the decree, but he's not really listening to God. He's not taking orders from God. He's giving orders. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to even higher positions in the province of Babylon. You see, he's giving them power, earthly power. Here we saw how this whole thing was established and set up in this world. All these brown words have to do with ground and things of this world. So we can start to see, when we look at relationships between the introduction and the summation. Summation is going to tell us how this story turned out. Introduction introduces us to the main themes within this story. So once we learn the rule, it's called the rule of introduction and summation. And we notice the titles here are repeated, but here's another title added. And here's a contrast. Now we're setting up a contrast to learn future lessons from between Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar, and this angel that came to save him. Nebuchadnezzar didn't do anything to save him, but Nebuchadnezzar continued to give out commands and decrees. And that tells us this link between Babylon and the world, the province of Babylon. See, Nebuchadnezzar thought he could hand out higher positions. But who really has that power? So now that you learned a few little rules of context here, hopefully you can start applying them and getting into some of your more studies and use them to look over and interpret the spiritual meaning. You got to learn, first of all, the physical aspects of this story, the furnace and everything else, before you can start understanding the spiritual. But it doesn't take people long to start listening to God, like has been the main theme in these first two chapters. And once you start listening to God, he's going to start revealing things to you, like I missed highlighting a few words here, and that's God's way of keeping you humble.